So late afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first online meetup. It's so happy that you could join us. Hope everyone has stayed safe during these unprecedented times. So I'm your host. My name is Laura. I'm a UX designer at Trimble. And for anyone out there who's a first timer, Helsinki Design Meetup is a community of designers from multiple disciplines, from architecture to interior design, UX design, front end developers, and illustrators. So it's great to have you with us. We've been doing meetups since last year of January, ranging from various topics. So, this is the place to discuss, connect, and broaden your views on design, meeting other designers from different fields. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know some of the practicalities and the schedule. So, you can see the schedule here. And we'll be having two talks as well as a Q&A session with a great guest that we have from InVision later on as well. We have the YouTube chat active, and Marta is there, your host, and she'll be taking any of your questions that you might have. So feel free to also comment there on your experiences with full-time remote working. But without further ado, hope you have your beers or whatever you prefer to drink ready, and just enjoy yourselves. And firstly, I'll give it up to our organizing team to introduce themselves. They've made this meetup possible. So please give a big virtual clap to Marta, Liisa, and Monica. Just a minute, guys.
Hi, my name is Martta Räty and I work as a UX designer and a project lead in a company called Process Genius. I've been with Helsinki Design Meetup since March and I will be hosting the chat. So if you have any questions, please send them to the YouTube chat and I will be forwarding them to our speakers. Thank you.
So thank you, Monica, for that. Yes, so back, I wanted to kind of tell you about. So, hi, yes, my name is Laura, and yes, that crazy person there is me in the picture. I've truly been working during this COVID-19 crisis from my closet since March onwards in our two-room apartment. And this is because there are actually two of us generally working here and having meetings from 9 to 5. And you can just imagine the frustration and difficulty when one of your colleagues in a meeting asks, did someone just say something in German? And then there's a complete silence. And I embarrassingly answer, no, I don't think so, but it could be my husband who's having a meeting just next door or right next to me. Don't think he speaks any German though. He's Indian. But luckily today, I've negotiated to have the desk in the living room and complete quiet for this meetup. Just a fair warning, I do have a small puppy, so if there's huge sounds of a tantrum, that's her. But So without further ado, let's get back on track. So besides being the lunatic in the closet, I'm also a UX designer at Trimble in the energy and public administration side. And today I'll be telling you about a recent experience I had trying to facilitate a completely remote user testing session that generally we've done face to face. I work with big utility companies, electricity, water, district heating, and cooling, and such, in Finland, Nordics, and in the US. My colleagues and I try to fit ourselves into the development process by bringing in elements from human centered design. So, mainly research, design, and of course, testing. But among ourselves, we also follow the design thinking methodology, and their testing plays a key role too. So, in reality, we end up doing quite a lot of testing, both after prototyping as well as when a product has been built and released to define possible issues not found earlier. And this testing needs to be reliable because the software is for maintaining utility networks. I mean, just imagine this poor maintenance man if suddenly the program gave a false signal that the electricity had been cut off from his stretch of the electricity line, when in reality it wasn't. That kind of an error would cost lives. So testing needs to be done well and reliably. Okay, to be frank, this is an extreme case, but it is true that safety needs to be at the back of the mind through the whole design process. Therefore, we've generally conducted our usability testing face to face to add precision, effectiveness, and control. Testing sessions were planned with the customer and done at their premises. This way, we'd be able to use the exact same software, backend systems, location, and tools that they would use when working normally. But then COVID-19 happened and we were literally stuck. I mean, even Spock there needs to wear a face mask. But the release date was just around the corner, and we literally had less than 2 weeks to convert our user testing to be remote. This caused tremendous panic, at least in me. So now you understand the lunatic in the closet. But I put my thinking cap on and I asked myself, what tools do we have on hand right now? Tools that don't require any great amount of learning, don't need new software licenses, because frankly, I mean, no offense to our IT department, but we'd never have those in time for the test session. Most importantly, these tools had to be familiar to our users as well. So firstly, we've got remote conferencing tools now. There's so many of them to choose from: Hangouts and Google Meets, yes, confusing, to Teams, and now controversial Zoom, and many others. Secondly, even though we're not getting to the same location as Joe, our user, but he has access to those facilities. I mean, he has to still do his work even with this COVID-19 pandemic to keep the society running. So Joe does his work normally and has access to the facilities. So I asked, why do we need to be there if we could just observe the situation and testing and do the testing remotely and reliably? Thirdly, Joe also has access to all the equipment he uses normally. We just need to make sure that whatever he uses and has on hand, we're able to connect to whatever platform we decide to use for facilitating the test. So, this brought me back to the roots of what good usability testing looks like. And it got me thinking of what are the general goals we are trying to achieve with testing. Do the methods really require face-to-face facilitation? And can we narrow the scope to get to the core of what we need to test? But there was also one big problem I want to make sure not to get wrong. Face-to-face testing is generally very time-consuming, but online testing cannot be. This is because online meetings and remote testing are way, way more exhausting and bring on more cognitive load than a face-to-face testing session. In face-to-face sessions, our feelings and attitudes are largely conveyed by nonverbal signals such as facial expressions, tone and pitch of the voice, gestures, posture, the distance between the communicators. And there, we process these cues largely automatically and are still able to listen to the speaker at the same time. But on a video chat, we need to work way harder to process nonverbal cues. So in online meetings, our minds are together when our bodies are not. That distance causes people to have conflicting feelings and is very exhausting. So I decided on a max 45-minute session. Not that it's the perfect time by any standards, but it allowed for those 5 to 10 minutes intros and other fluffy stuff that needed to go on. And for the actual testing, it was actually timed to be about 20, max 25 minutes. Next hurdle was the tools and methods we'd use. So, we don't want any poor connections because poor network connections and technical difficulties that create silence is bad, very bad. It's the opposite in normal conversations, where silence creates a natural rhythm to a conversation. However, when it happens in a video call, we become anxious about the technology. A German academics showed that the delays on phone or conferencing system shaped our views of people negatively. Even delays of 1.2 seconds made people perceive the responder as less friendly or focused, and we definitely didn't want our testers to feel negatively towards us or the testing session in general. And I think you can agree to that. So, to overcome both the time constraint and minimize the chaos and the poor connections and technical difficulties and all that lot, right? I prepared a lot. I mean a lot. I made guides, instructions, prerequisite tasks for the participants so the actual testing session would go smoothly. We did a full 2 days of test runs at the office with internal consultants who hadn't seen any of the new features to make sure that the process was flawless. I wanted to have plan A, plan B, and plan C ready, and so do you. Then the actual testing. As said previously, we use technologies that were familiar to everyone and ones we've used ourselves. It was crucial to be able to observe the users, clearly identify issues later, and interview them at the same time. To observe users and not to miss a single thing, we recorded and live streamed the testing sessions internally to developers and stakeholders within our company. It was also great that if any glitches occurred that were not part of the test, developers could quickly fix them before the next sessions. You know, like the back end had some problems, this, that, technical issues. Those were all nicely fixed. We used Google Meets as it's internally used in our office, and also it came with the tools needed for streaming and recording that we required. The setup was really, really simple. There was only one tester at a time who had prepared for the session and could connect all of the needed devices to the session and knew how to switch between screens if needed. Next, we had 2 facilitators, one who purely conversed with the tester, taking care of the flow of the test and interviewing when needed. And the second, only taking notes, observing the nonverbal signals and cues, and taking care of the live stream audio and other techie stuff. What was great about Meets was that the second facilitator also had the power to switch between participants' screens when needed so that nothing was missed in the interaction between the user and the prototype we were testing. So after the testing session, assessing behavior, identifying problems, click patterns was easy because we had our notes and everything was recorded. So everything was also shared beforehand with the stakeholders. The links and the material for the testing was all there. This made it so much easier to facilitate for those analysis workshops because everyone had at least seen something already of the testing sessions. And because everything was done in such a short amount of time, things were not forgotten. Identifying the problems was quick and painless, and the report was easy to go through with the team. It was great to be able to point directly into a source clip and timestamp where something went terribly wrong. It made the findings that much more powerful and substantiated our findings. But key component was the fact that the whole team was on board and everyone had access to all the recordings and all the data. Now, because I work in a highly engineer-driven company where there's hundreds of developers to one designer, I've come to make my test reports in Excel. Yes, you heard me correctly, Excel. As a designer, I love, and I mean I love, qualitative data. What better than doing thematic analysis using codes to organize the data and searching for the patterns, etc., or doing that huge, wonderfully nice affinity diagram and proving that you have all your points down, everything's there. But unfortunately, engineers are a bit different. They love numbers and they are qualitatively driven. And so that's what I've done. I try to talk in their language and put up success rates and big graphs for them to drool over. But I also sneak in all of that qualitative data too. I place coded quotes and tester comments on each question too. And believe it or not, some of them have started to read them. So it's been a little bit of a success. So let's go over the steps one more time. So 1, prepare, 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 even more than for a face-to-face testing session. Do practice runs and use technology that is familiar to both you and the participants. Make them use the tools that they work with every day. Make all information available to everyone in the team and make them aware of it. Send Google Calendar invitations, links to the live stream or recording sessions, and make them understand what the primary focus of the testing session is. Finally, identify problems by bringing the whole team to the analysis and the reporting phase by presenting data the way they are familiar with. So what's the takeaway? COVID-19 has brought on positive changes and forced us to think of new creative ways of doing usability testing. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, now's the time. Marta is preparing those and taking those, and I'll be observing. And if you have any questions also later on, just drop me a line either on WhatsApp or email. I'll be happy to answer those as well. Oh, there is a question, a very good one. How did you solve last minute technical problems if you had any? A really good question. Technical problems, they definitely come up, and you just have to be really honest with the participants and just say, hey, frankly, we are, this is a prototype. There are still some technical glitches, and just try to run it as smoothly as possible. Obviously, if the technical problems are too much, then you might have to reschedule. But generally, we've been able to pull off the user testing, even if there has been some minor technical difficulties. There is another question. Would you do this again if the situation changes? I would actually. I think it has been a positive experience. I would say the remote testing is very good for products and services or things that you work with, and you have a very clear idea of what you want to test, and you've maybe even had those participants that you've had them before, so they've gotten to know you, so you have some form of connection to them already. I would say that then user testing doing remotely works very well. And of course, you have to make sure that the participant that's on the other side feels comfortable. So it doesn't work all the time and for every situation, but I've been highly surprised that we were able to pull this off, and it did work for us at least. And I would like to use this maybe later on as well, so I wouldn't have to travel to, fly off to Norway or somewhere to take a user test and then, fly back the same day. I feel like it's quite stressful. So this was in that way less stressful. Okay. Uh, there's another question. Any comment on how to generate trust with your interviewees in an online session? Really good question. So trust, I think trust is earned by being honest, and I when we did the user testing session, we didn't just jump into, hey, let's start. Like in generally in Finland, we always want to just start working immediately and doing that. um, I would say that there has to be those 5-10 minutes when you kind of like, you talk about the normal situation of what's happening. How are you? How's your day? Have you had your, the afternoon coffee, maybe things like that. Do you want to go and grab a cup of coffee before we start? Just kind of forming that kind of relationship and being honest. You can also say, hey, I've had quite a busy day, so don't mind me if I am, if I'm a little this or that. So I've noticed that kind of forms trust, but it does build over time, and it is a lot tougher in remote sessions. Um, and there's a next question. How difficult was it to pull out a completely new design method from one day to another? Hmm, I'm not sure how to answer this one very well. I would say that it was definitely difficult to pull out a completely new design method of doing the usability research that was supposed to be face to face and move it to a remote and facilitate it remotely in such a short amount of time. But we did have that a little bit less than 2 weeks. So in that ways, it was luckily not a new method every single day. Uh, so kind of got used to it, and those test runs we did, those 2 days of test runs we did with our internal people, it was a save. It was a god save. Like I say, don't ever go without preparing, you know without testing your test for a remote session. Perfect. I think that's all the questions we have time for. But thank you guys. And you can send me any further questions you have. Do send them to me. So I'm just going to bring up the schedule here just a bit. My puppy is pulling a tantrum also. Most probably you hear that. Sorry about that. So just a second. Perfect. But we'll be going on a 5-minute break. And we'll be back in about 17:30 with our second talk. So stay tuned for that. So see you back soon. So thank you, everyone. We got the notice that when we were introducing the team, some of the audio was not coming through. So I'm going to switch over to the team again. They'll do their introductions because they've really done a really hard work on this thing. So just a second, I'll give it up to the team again. And if there are any difficulties, please just let us know in the chat right away. So just a moment, guys.
Okay, how about now?
No? No. I hear Marta though from here,
Okay.
but I hear myself.
Okay. Well, they can hear Laura, but nothing else.
Okay, if it's not going to work, then let's hope that my presentation works. That's what I'm worried about.
It's working.
But it's okay. People are.
Hey, now
this
it
is what
works.
happens.
Now it's working.
working.
Okay.
Nice.
So
Okay, should we? Okay, so I guess I'll start introducing myself again. Okay, if everybody can hear me, then hi, my name is Liisa Benmergui, and I am still excited to be here, even though you have not heard me say this a couple of times. So this is the third time is a charm. I'm a service and UX designer at a company called Frantic, and it's based in Helsinki. I've been involved with this Helsinki Design Meetup now for about a month. So just in the end of April, when Laura sent out the call for people to help out or present, I decided to accept both challenges, and I will be presenting later on in the meeting. So I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts with you and maybe hearing some of your questions.
Hello, everybody. Now everybody can hear me apparently. So my name is Monica. I'm an interior designer and exhibition designer. I've joined as well as with Marta in March, the Helsinki Design Meetup, and I will try to introduce some special design topic in our agenda. So you should be tuned for August. But okay, now maybe we give the present. We are gonna present Liisa with her amazing presentation.
Okay, I'm just gonna check that. Monica, can you let me know if I can be heard? Yes, perfect. Okay, so now, of course, yes, where were we? Okay, let me just get back to my notes because yes, okay, perfect. So the topic I will be talking about today is remote facilitation and a little bit of thoughts on my experiences during COVID and or the lockdown and feelings that I've had during that time. So the topic name is the loneliness of the remote facilitator, and I will continue by introducing myself. Yes. Sorry, it's a little bit weird now that I got interrupted a couple of times. I'm a little bit frazzled. So, whew. Okay, I'll just take a drink. Yes, so my name is Liisa Benmergui, and a little bit about me. I'm a UX and service design specialist at Frantic. I work with lots of people, and I tend to be called a change agent because I go into companies, I work with teams, I help them figure out maybe how they could have stronger processes, work together better, and so on. And while doing this, I also help them hone their ways of working. During a lot of the work that I do, I'm also a researcher. So I tend to be asking questions, interviewing end users. I work in the digital realm. So this kind of stuff is my bread and butter. And working on site is actually really important. Since I'm a design consultant in the digital world, I'm not scared, and I'm really used to, let's say, using online tools. And for example, Slack and so on with my colleagues, and even with many of my clients. But one thing that's really been a big change is actually not seeing people other than my immediate family. Living in suburbia, I see people on the road, and we are 2.5 meters apart, always saying hi. But that's about the extent of my interactions with humans right now. I have 2 small children, so at least I have human touch, and that's important. And there are lots of people out there right now who may be even craving just like bumping into people like I am. I like that you kind of have this messiness and so on. So the loneliness comes from I would say the 5 stages of grief I have gone through, and maybe many of you have heard of these. And basically, at the beginning, it was denial. Like, what is this virus? It's just like the flu. Why can't we just go to work? Blah blah blah. Then going and then getting angry because they're like, shit. I really want to, just work. And why does this why does COVID-19 have to happen? And I'm so angry because I want to interact with people. I want to do my job. I want to do my job well. And as a knowledge worker, it's not possible to make decisions on your own. We're all in Finland liable to whatever laws and regulations. And so there I go, bargaining, like thinking like, if this just ends, I'm going to be so much better at my job. I'm going to make sure that everybody understands what the point, the goals of our projects are. And then there's like the phase of depression where you're like, nothing's going to change. I will look at my journal right now. What did I write? Day 72 of self-quarantine. I go to shops and sort of see people at a distance, but it's all left me thinking a lot about how to engage people online and figure out more than just what they want to share with me, but deeper thoughts and meaning. So when you're online with people, you're also looking at what they actively want to share and not passively. And that's something that's really been saddening me. And then I get to the stage of acceptance. I start the whole cycle again, but I get to acceptance at some point. And this image here really makes perfect sense. It's me at any given moment of the day. It's one of these. I try to keep the smile, but for my kids, but many times inside, it's just a bunch of these funny little looking eggs. And I think that this is something that we all have to accept in ourselves also all these feelings. And when I think about all these feelings, I think about Blade Runner. And I know I'm a bit of a nerd and a geek. So it's one of those moments that stuck with me over the years. And it's a bit of cliche now, Rutger Hauer in the rain. And it's a moving scene. It's nostalgic. It grips me every time. And if you're not familiar with the scene, here's the quote that is stated by Rutger Hauer. And so basically, I feel like this. I'm wondering how long this will last, and if people down the road will then go, I could say to people, I've seen things you won't believe. So basically, I've seen people sitting really close to each other and not wearing masks and not worrying about getting each other sick. And that's what I feel like when I'm looking at this. It's like all those moments will be lost in time. And there's the saddening moment for me is that I look at a picture like this, where I was facilitating a group of my colleagues. And yes, it's kind of funny that we're all sitting with laptops. They were all answering questions feverishly, but can you see that there are only millimeters between them? And this picture makes me happy and sad at the same time right now, because the engagement that there is with physical contact and being physically close to people is really something that I am missing. And I think a lot of us are missing, and especially facilitators who do a lot of on-site work and try to get a deeper meaning and get to like watch people and their kind of twitches and their funny movements. It's it is something that you want to really recreate, of course, in your remote moments. So once we get to the level of acceptance, we're not talking about complacency. But accepting the situation is that we're currently in. It's very different from what we have been used to in the world of face-to-face and like workshop facilitation in person. It's basically all about rethinking and practicing acceptance. So what does it mean to accept yourself while you are while you're at it, accepting others for all their shortcomings, because it's not just technical stuff. It's people have time management skills that start to get emphasized that you don't know about. And you're like, really? What's the problem? Like, why couldn't you read the agenda? Why couldn't you get to the meeting on time? And so on. And then you're thinking in your head, and these feelings start coming up, and there is a bit of a loneliness. It's hard to like vent that out to anybody directly. Of course you can call somebody and so on, but it really is something interesting when you have that loss of control over the situation and how much pressure everybody starts to get involved with, and their personal pressure during COVID. They might have somebody who's ill in their family, or the schools are closed, children are in the homes, etc., etc. I had a lot of pressure while my kids were at home. I have a 2 and a 6-year-old. But during this, I started thinking about like meeting new people during the first time you have a call. And definitely it's not the same thing as if you met them in person. So strategic work that I do, especially, there is no like yes, no answer. It involves a lot more than just one-off calls and gathering Post-its. So I think that somebody was like, I equated the fact that when you do strategic work, we have the tools, we have knowledge, but it's the same as if you walked into an empty room with a bunch of Post-its, and then all of a sudden everybody said, well, look, facilitation can happen. So we have Miro, we have all these great tools. And so I think that for myself anyways, everything is so verbal, and you're asking a lot of participants just to speak their mind every time. So it's very hard then to share whatever they share without ever having met them other than in the virtual room. Now, I'm not talking about people you know for years, or people you work with and your colleagues. You've been onboarded and so on. You've been taught how to work together. But this part here is, I'm thinking, I have this quote by Brene Brown, and I really think that this is where you come to the realization that although technology helps us stay connected, we're not necessarily connected to each other, really getting a connection. So rarely can a response make something better. So what makes something better is connection. So if somebody's feeling sad, or somebody's feeling bad about something, then they want to connect. You want to be empathic to them, not sympathetic. So you don't want to talk down to them and and just respond to what they're thinking. You really want to connect with them and think, that's an interesting thought. As a facilitator, you're trying to paraphrase and rethink things and share your thoughts with the people, but you don't want to put your opinion on anybody else's. So if people are reacting to their situation, they may also need a place to open up, and that might even be in a remotely facilitated situation if the situation calls for it. Now, one thing that I have noticed, and this is also part of the loneliness, is that the social cues are now invisible. They haven't gone, but the video, it helps, of course. I can see people, but when you're in these social situations, you notice when people tend to maybe move shake their leg under the table, or kind of turn to somebody and go, and then they were just about to say something, and then they pick up their hand, they kind of are like waving their hand. And these things, we can recreate them, but that body language in a quieter person also might tell you that you should ask that person for more, and you want to glean that information. So when I'm working in these conceptual level and trying to find innovative ways of talking to people, going remote has actually been a big challenge in getting that human aspect, because I feel that we have the tools. So when we're in situations like this, where you've had people are working together next to each other, you can go peer over their shoulders. You can pull somebody aside. You can easily turn to somebody and say, hey, you can pull somebody into the meeting. Somebody was down the hall, and say, hey, I'm going to go get Laura. I'm going to go get Marta. They should be in on this meeting. It's not the same in the remote situation. Everything's a lot more planned, a lot more scripted, and that spontaneity, I think, is what's missing. So I think that yes, as Laura's talk, she talked about, like, you have to prepare people. They don't want to feel silly. They need to understand how the tools work. But even with all of that, then there's still a little bit of something. There's that human aspect. And I don't know, and I can't say there's no solution to this, but it's something that I'm grappling with right now. I don't know about you. So if you have any comments on this, please do share them, and I'd like to hear them afterwards. Now, how to recreate or create a comfortable atmosphere when you never have contact. And of course, let's be honest, in Finland, if you're in Finland, people don't touch each other. I am a touchy-feely person, but I have learned to also, I came from Montreal. I grew up in Montreal in Canada, and people kiss each other on the cheeks. It's normal. So when I moved to Finland, I'm hybrid, so I'm half. I noticed that I just stopped doing things like that. Now I might high five somebody. Whoa, it's like the closest I can get. But if you want to, I'm a touchy-feely person. I go up to people, I move them, So you can't do that in these remote situations. And that's something that I've noticed that is something lacking, and then something that you really want to maybe figure out, how can you recreate those moments, or should you recreate them, or should you just find some new moments now to make up? And so I just briefly wanted to look at, like, how I see the things, and planning is the key. And Laura brought that up as well. You have to be very considerate about how you're going to be working. And a lot of things that I've been reading, as well as what I came up with, what we've discussed at my office with my colleagues, is all about the consideration of, like, why are you even going to do this? And the why really is the design driver for any facilitation. You're trying to find user needs, you're trying to figure out what people want, what people think. And you should really look at the why, and that's at the center. And as you can see, how is very light in my picture, and that how is, I think that we have the tools. I'm not worried about that. And so I think that in terms of why, what, and then there's the what, of course, like, what do you want what do you expect, and who will you have there? So you want to have decision makers, you want to have people who can affect change. But the how, that's sort of right now I've taken as a status quo of, like, we have Mural, we have Miro, we have all kinds of great post-its, online whiteboards, and so on. And that is possible to use. But you really want to just keep the why, and then try to find novel ways of engaging your audience. Now, one thing that I think that we have to do as remote facilitators, or anybody who's thinking about facilitation, looking at a group really, and not just commandeering a meeting. I'm really talking about working together, co-creation sessions, is that you have to look that and accept that context of your participant is unknown. Somebody may or may not put the video off. Somebody might be sitting in a room like this, and I will not show you, but you can't know what everything is on my floor right now. You don't know that like there could be chaos behind that door, and it's not anymore so professional, it's more intimate, and that can be scary for other people. But you'd have to understand that you don't know what context your participants are in, and distraction is everywhere. There's constantly somebody coming into the house somewhere. If you were at the office, you could assume that a level of professionality, that people will not come and interrupt the meeting or interrupt you. And then being able to read a room is not really possible. And that's not to be negative and not to be, I just think that you can't reading an online meeting is rather difficult, actually. Quiet doesn't mean anything negative anymore. It's just people trying to be considerate. And whereas when nobody talks in a meeting, in an on-site meeting or a real-time face-to-face meeting, that could mean basically like everything sucks and you haven't done your job right. So one thing that you can affect is creating the mood of the remote session, being kind. Asking people to, I had a colleague who had this great tip, and she said, ask people to, when they first come in, don't start the meeting, like start the meeting on time, but ask people, do you want to get a cup of coffee? You want to get a cup of tea? Go run out and get it. You're at home. It's okay. And recreating that moment where people run into meetings generally, and they're like, oh, just a second, I just want to get my coffee. And that feeling is something that I thought was great. And I thought that was lovely that people start thinking of these, like, not taking for granted that somebody might really have just had back-to-back meetings and they came into your remote session for a 2-hour session with you and they want to be present, but they didn't get to go to the washroom. They didn't go to, so you ask people at the beginning, like, hey, everybody good? Everybody comfortable? And preparing your session participants beforehand is really, really important. So pre-reads, sending information, encouraging the use of cameras is always great, but the bandwidth problem or bandwidth question is always something you should ask prior to. You should make sure that, is everybody okay with like having cameras on? And do you have a good enough connection at home? Because if not, if I know that most of them don't want to have cameras on, I might change up the situation, like the whole session. And then using movement and breaks. So really asking people, maybe just get up. Let's all do a couple of stretches together, or okay, everybody stand up, walk around your house and come back, getting them to do stuff, and then sharing the rules of engagement, of course, and then really telling people like, okay, if you want to talk, we have a plugin in Chrome, or, a nod plugin, raise your hand, so on and so forth, use whatever is in your tool and so on. So these were things that I felt like, okay, things I have to accept, things that I can affect. And then activities during your sessions. Basically, check-ins and check-outs are easy to run. So a check-in is always, of course, like one question the facilitator can ask everybody, and everybody in turn answers it. Nobody talks out of line, so everybody gets a chance to actually share. It could be timed 1 minute. It could be a couple of sentences. But these kind of things, and then checkouts are really important. So at the end, don't just have people like rush off, like, okay, I got to go to the next meeting. I'm already late. And then they just go clunk, they hang up. Then you ask everybody, take a minute, share something, and so on. And then work on figuring out ways to have more one-on-one sessions. So for myself anyways, when I'm remotely facilitating, it's very difficult to get deeper into what people are thinking. So if you can have a follow-up, possibly with a very small group, and we're not talking about breakout sessions, because then you'll have to have multiple facilitators. If you're really facilitating by yourself, it really means that you need to think about these things. Now, we have the tools, but for myself, it's something now that I don't think we have yet fully solved for. And I think it would be great to hear more about this. It's very little talked about on the internet right now, is really how to go deeper, and going deeper than what people want to share is a challenge. So right now, people are sharing, like where we have all these great online post-its, people write exactly what they want to share. You're not, it's very difficult to get people to share things that they believe. Like, so you might need a lot more time online than you would have if you were on site. Now, and when you're doing research, especially. Now, what is acceptable behavior in the post-COVID-19 and pre-vaccine era? This is what I'm wondering about now. People are like, borders are opening up, people are going back to work. Physical reality is maybe no longer a dream, like for me. Maybe, possibly we can. Is it really possible to do this anymore? That people can just stand in a room, play a design game. This is one of the design games that I've helped design. And we were testing this out at the office. It's a while back. And now I'm wondering, is this possible anymore? Or is this the reality that we're all going to be, I'm on the other side of the street, across the street, looking at my participants going, hey, is everybody online? Okay, let's do this. Like, how is this going to feel? Like, so I know this sounds a bit silly, but for myself anyways, I've been really thinking about these things. And so I think that we have to get creative. We can't mourn the loss of the ways of working. I have gone through those like steps of grief, but I think that at one point you come out, you start looking to the future. And I think we should start sharing more experiences about how we can make that human factor and bring that human factor into our remote facilitation sessions. So that's it. Thanks for listening. My name is Liisa Benmergui, and you can find me on Twitter at Liisa, and in LinkedIn with my full name, Liisa.Benmergui. So thank you. Do you have any questions? Let me just check here quickly. Okay. Let's see. What's been the best remote session you've ever had, even without all the limitations? Well, I would say that in terms of remote sessions, the best ones have been with, to be honest, with people that I have worked with, maybe I've already met. And really having that rapport with them made it a little bit easier to play around with things and ask them silly questions. And they already kind of knew my humor and so on. So I think that that's like, I would say basically the best ones I've had are where you can be playful and you can, of course, I forgot to say that in my presentation. I probably blanked out on it, but like really using paper and pen. So asking people to write things and draw them and then show them into the camera. That's like my favorite thing to do. And I think that that's something that makes it human. So that's one solution that I've had, is that don't just go digital, like let people scroll things on. And there's another question. Have you made any mistakes while organizing a remote co-creation session? What did you learn? And so mistakes now, I mean, constantly making mistakes. I think that that's all I do, is that you're just like, I should have done this. But I think that for myself, maybe now, especially going fully remote, the one thing that I have really learned is the sending of materials prior, and maybe that wasn't such a big thing for me. I was always kind of like, okay, we're going to go through things in the meeting, and that was something that now I think I've sort of learned through this lockdown and COVID, is that really sending information, I'm an over communicator, but I think that sending information ahead of time is really useful. And maybe even sending the surveys that I used to do and then I stopped doing, I think I should do them. I found that that's something that I should do more. I hope that answered the question. It's a bit hard to off the top of my head, but let's see. Okay. Do you think the lack of social cues could be due to how we are used to communicate and present ourselves in very limited frame digitally? So, okay, if I understood correctly, so do you mean that, if I understood the question correctly, is that we usually are used to communicating and presenting ourselves so narrowly, like we're there and we get the job done and that's it. But for myself, I think the social cues, maybe in the video and stuff, it's a little bit harder to, when you're presenting as a facilitator, if you're looking at a canvas, like a digital tool, let's say, and looking at the grid of persons. And if there's more than 4 or 5, it's really hard to notice all the different movements. And I think that's something that for myself anyways, I find it very difficult. And I think that people are not used to, you have to tell people, maybe sometimes it's actually okay. Some places I've noticed that they nod or they wave, and then everybody sees them like, oh, okay. So there's like, but if you're like 20 persons in a meeting, like in a remotely facilitated meeting, it can be really rather difficult to have that kind of engagement. I've been noticing the amount of information we can transmit in real life is way higher than the one that we can transmit remotely. Have you noticed the same? And if yes, did you try to find a way to solve this problem? Okay, let me just reread that because it was a good question, but it's a bit long. So wait, yes. It's kind of strange. It is true. Although we have all these tools, all these remote tools, and you can so the question being that you can do a lot more in real life, like transmit information. And a lot of times there's the nonverbal, and then there's the verbal, and then there's the written. So you have all these, the combination, and it depends on how much you know the participants, that then maybe you can engage with them remotely just as efficiently. But if you have a lot of persons, I find that you can't walk around the room, so if you put people in groups, even in breakout rooms, if you walk around the room, you might notice, those people are all sitting close together. Those people are sitting apart. That probably already starts telling me. So yeah, but I think that I think we're out of time for the questions, and I can go on. I hope you guys got something out of my talk. I'm more than happy to answer any more questions later down, and I'm pretty sure that we'll share our Twitter accounts and so on, or on emails. So yeah, let's go on break now, and then we will continue with a Q&A session with Mindaugas from Envision, and Laura will be hosting that Q&A session. Thank you, everybody.
So, welcome back, everyone. Next, we have Mindaugas from InVision here with us today. He'll be answering your questions on remote working and distributed teams. As some of you might know, InVision is a completely remote working place, so he knows exactly what he's talking about. So, write your questions to Marta in the YouTube chat, and I'm going to give it off to him to give introductions. Like you can see, I have some forces at the back who's taking care of the puppy at the moment. There has been some crises here, but take it away. Just a second. So there you go. Take it away, Mindaugas.
Thank you. Hey everyone. So I'm Mindaugas. I'm based in Valencia, Spain. I also have a couple of, well, not puppies, but sleeping beasts that could wake up at any moment. So apologies in advance if they start barking. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm based in Valencia, Spain. I work remotely for InVision. I've been here for about 3 years. Fun fact, I don't come from a design background, but I'm often mistaken for a designer, and that was a thing even way before joining InVision. And right now, I run one of our programs, one of our community programs, which is called the Design Leadership Forum. So, and in case you don't know, InVision is a digital product design and collaboration platform, and we're about 750 totally distributed since the start of the company, which was in 2011.
Okay, that's a lot of people, 750 all distributed. And are they like, I'm just going to ask because I'm interested. Are they like everywhere in the world? So you could have like a colleague that's like in Japan and you're in Valencia, and then, you're supposed to try to, work with that. You did previously mention about that your team is actually in the US in Seattle and you have that time difference. How has that worked out for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's, it could be tricky. I guess because we're a totally distributed team, we approach those kind of challenges with a different perspective. So when I joined this specific team 2 months ago, so prior to that, most of the team I worked with was based in Europe, same time zones, maybe an hour difference, 2 hours difference here and there. This is totally different. So from the first day, during my onboarding into the team, we kind of set some ground rules of how we're going to communicate. So because there is, like I mentioned earlier, their day starts 3 or 4 p.m. my time, and that's if they get up at 6 and 7. If we want to start, our daily, say, stand-up call, which is not ideal. So we've just got into this habit of, they make sure they document everything I need to take action on, and they make sure to tag me and be very clear and specific about what the ask is or how I need to follow up. Because again, I'm based here. A lot of people are based in the US. So when you wake up, Slack and email can be very busy. You can sometimes lose important information. So yeah, that was kind of the idea for us to achieve things better was just be very clear, be very intentional, and make sure what you're asking is, I don't have to wonder like, what do they mean? And it's 10 a.m. for me. They're not going to be up for another 5 or 6 hours. So that's been the key.
Okay, I'm just going to check. There was also the question of how do you handle meetings? Because we were talking just before this that now that it's been like a wall. You don't work remotely and then a wall and you work remotely and then you have all of these meetings and they just keep piling up and piling up and piling up and you just don't get a chance to do your actual work. So how does meetings and how does working, like how does a normal day look like to you?
I mean, I can tell you tomorrow I don't have one meeting.
Wow.
My whole calendar is clear, and that comes from. There's a number of things. One, I think a big one is trust. So you're allowed to kind of make the decision whether you need to be in that meeting, and if you don't feel like you need to be in something you've been invited to, you're okay to cancel and nobody will question that decision. If there was something that you needed to know, you might get a Slack message or an email afterwards, and you'll be tagged saying, "Hey, by the way, this was mentioned, and actually this could be interesting to you." But I've never had someone, "Hey, why weren't you at that meeting?" So that's, I think, a big thing. But the big challenge I noticed for people I know, friends of mine work at companies, even here locally in Valencia, when they were forced to go remotely. At the very beginning, we had a bunch of conversations, and we quickly identified that people just were not doing the basics. So, they weren't documenting the meeting in the right way. So they weren't setting an agenda. For me, if I don't see an agenda in a meeting that comes in, especially if it's not clear what it's for, like, I might not join it, and it's okay for me to do that. So setting up an agenda and making sure that's regular, right? That's a big thing. The other one was, again, like I mentioned, being allowed to not have to join the meeting. That's again, that's a big thing, but that all comes down to trust. So a couple of companies we kind of kept in regular touch all the way through their journey the last couple of months into being all of a sudden remote, made those small improvements, and you could see the big change in how hectic their days were, how productive they were, how they were having a lot less Zoom fatigue. Because I get it, if you sit on Zoom all day long, your eyes are tired, your brain is tired. It's just not the same. So those things were super important.
Curious, just really curious. How do you build trust when you haven't met like the people before? Like how in a team do you form that trust? Because you kept saying trust quite many times there.
This is where I think remote is not the kind of end-all solution to everything. And what works for me might not work for someone else or a lot of others. The trust came is for us, we were born a completely remote company. So when the company was small of 5, 10, 20, 50, they were able to make the mistakes that a lot of others are making right now, suddenly being remote or deciding, to just switch to stay remote. We've made a lot of those mistakes. So when I joined, it was, in my interview and onboarding, it was made very, very clear that you're going to be very autonomous. No one, and I question that. You hear things at interviews that you really want, right, from joining a company. You want that freedom and decision making and autonomy. I certainly did. So I was a little bit skeptical. But I can tell you a funny story of my first day. Was when my first day, I came online at 10 a.m. My manager was in the US, so he came online about 12 my time. And at 1 o'clock, I was going to take lunch, and I slacked him and I said, "Hey, I'm just going to go offline for an hour for lunch." And his response, it was hilarious, but it kind of painted the picture of how my work or how my life is going to be at Envision. And he just said, like, "Look, if I don't want to hear it, I don't want to slack from you every single day telling me you're going to go, offline for an hour for lunch. Unless you're going to be offline for more than 6 hours, I don't really want to know. Like, if you need to go to the bank, you need to go to the doctor, you need to take your dogs for a walk 6 times in the morning, it's fine. Like, if you do your work and at the end of the month, like, the results are there, I don't really care." And that's been my experience, since then. And that's the kind of trust that comes, right? So if you really understand what it means, you deliver the work that you're supposed to deliver, it's all good.
That sounds actually fantastic.
Oh, I guess it's just me now. Oh, okay. Okay, I can take a look at the questions. So the question was, what are the benefits of remote working? It again, I think it really depends on you as the person. That's that's huge for me. I wanted certain things. I wanted to live in a sunnier place, and that working remotely allowed me to do that because that was important to me. I'm also what I call like a social introvert, I guess. I don't like being in an office environment Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But I do like, that human interaction. So being able to work remotely, live in Spain, and with the work that I do, I get to travel quite a bit. Well, not now. I would get my human interaction from, going to places like Helsinki for events and conferences, once a month. And that worked, that was the perfect balance for me. So it just really depends on, uh, what you're looking for, what's important to you as a person. Sure. Yeah, we definitely discuss a lot of things, and it comes back down to the fact that, having too many meetings, we're okay to call each other out and say, should this have been an email or a Slack message instead, right? And we let's not do this again. And we all live between Slack, our own product, and email. So those are the kind of three places we all use to communicate together. I'm sure product design and engineering teams use certain things, but mostly that's how we communicate with each other. But in terms of just the protocol, I mean, we do have a what I would call a Slack etiquette, as such, because you are often sending a message to somebody you have never met before, and the tone needs to be a little bit different. So I always, the first, maybe I would say the first year, I would stop and rethink and reread what actually I was writing and to whom. If I was, if it was an ask, was it coming across just me like, hey, I don't know you, but can you do this thing for me? So adding a little bit more context, making sure you're saying hello, and introducing yourself if you haven't met them. Those are the protocols. I think we all stick by and do it quite well.
Mm. So sorry, guys, I dropped out for just a second, but so the next question, I'll pick up from where Liisa left off. So the next question is how the communication and collaboration between different teams, so dev, UI, UX, whatever, is working remotely. Has there been any issues or problems that have come up?
I couldn't point to the like specific issues, but the one thing I will say is, and I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, it is still challenging. Nobody has it figured out, right? Just because you say you're a totally distributed company, you've been doing it for 10 years, that doesn't mean that and everything works perfectly. we're all humans, right? We all have even challenges communicating face to face in an office environment. So doing it remotely adds, I think, an extra layer of complexity. So missing context, I think, rework, over, under communicating. Those are challenges that we all deal with. And but the biggest thing is just being hyper aware that those are the challenges and constantly working to try and improve. And when you feel like you fixed one thing, don't just kind of rest on your laurels and feel like, oh, we have it figured out, right? If there are challenges, just be quick to address them. That's the biggest thing. In terms of specific problems, I think time zones can be an issue. So now we're 750 people or so. We have teams that are located in friendlier time zones to each other. So I think that solves a big issue, because otherwise, if you have 10 in the US, 10 in Europe or Australia, it can get very tricky. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I can imagine that. I mean, like trying to communicate with everyone in different places and time differences and everything else. There's a hypothetical question. If you would need to have a workplace for more than one, what would you think it would need to be like, and for whom? So it's kind of like if you had to move into a workplace now, what do you think it would look like?
As in like an office?
Yeah,
Or
I think that's what the question means. I'm just guessing here. I hope I'm getting this right.
Okay. Good question. So I've always said, like, as much as I love remote work, I would take an option to go to an office once a week, maybe. So before the pandemic, we all had, in the major cities around the world, Envision had access to WeWork. So you didn't have to go in, but you could if you wanted to. So places like London, New York, San Francisco, where there's a high concentration of people from Envision, you could pop in to the London office on a Tuesday morning, and there'd be 5, 6, 7 people working together. They don't necessarily work in the same team, the same department, but they all go in and they enjoy each other's company. My true kind of hope from this whole pandemic thing, and I'm sure you've all heard all these companies announcing going fully remote or whatever, is that they really think about what that means, and that actually the best outcome is that truly flexible work is the outcome from this whole thing. I don't think, totally remote for everybody, I don't think that's an option, because while I get to live in a nice house in Spain and that works for me, others might not. Just because you're all of a sudden remote, you can't just pick up and move to Spain, right? You have kids, they go to school, they have their friends, you have your parents, whatever that may be. So truly flexible work where you can come and go, whether it's in your house, your apartment, or to an office, as you please, without anybody asking any questions. Why weren't you in the office today or yesterday? I think that's the winning solution. How that's going to pan out, I don't know. But for most, to truly have that impact and keep people sane, and that would be my hope.
I hope so too. I really hope so too, because it would be lovely to have be able to be out in the country and live there, and then just pop in the office whenever you feel like that you need to be there.
Mhm.
There's another question on organizational culture. So how is your organizational culture? As do you have any traditional hierarchies, or are you more or less flat? Like how is it there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's traditional enough where you have, the C-suite, VPs, directors, senior managers. It really, I think, the relationship between those groups or within individual teams, I think it really depends on the people within that team. So I don't know. There's lots of different talk about this is better, this isn't better. To me, what I've seen, and I've been in different types of structures, that if the people you work with, whether it's your manager or your colleagues, if you're in a flat structure, aren't nice people, you ain't gonna stick around that long. End of story. That's kind of that's how I view things, right? So like in any places, you have good managers and bad managers. So they could have a great team, but be a bad manager and it just doesn't work. And, oh, well, that's the wrong structure. No, to me, that's a people problem. So if you hire bad people, you're still going to have those issues. That's just my personal view, just from my own experience.
Definitely. There's another question. What kind of spaces do you prefer to use or use if you don't need to go to the physical office?
Definitely a fan of a nice, chilled coffee shop. But I do like working at home. So again, before I took the job, I was I thought about, okay, if I'm going to work remotely for a long time, I kind of took a pause and really thought about what's important for me. And for me is like, I have 2 dogs. I like being in my own space, a lot of the time. So I just found a way to have my own space where I could swap, different locations within my own space during the day. So right now I'm in the office, but earlier I was working from the terrace, so kind of making that change. Yes, I'll go to the coffee shop, but sometimes you'll get, loud people. I definitely wouldn't go to a coffee shop for like important calls or meetings or anything like that. But if I was, wanting to feel a little bit more creative or inspired, I just go to a co-working space just for a day, right? And just hire a desk for a few hours. Sometimes it's nice hearing like the chatter of people. What are people working on? What are they building? Like pitching, to a VC, whatever that may be. You can get kind of, a little bit inspired from that.
You said coffee shop first. I just like hooked onto that because we had that conversation that during the COVID-19, you're in Spain and it has been in complete lockdown, and now they're gradually opening up. And you said something about the coffee shop. Would you want to tell about that?
Yeah. So I don't live in the city. I live about 20, 25 minutes outside of the city. So there's a small kind of town nearby within 10-minute walk. And it has some nice bars, restaurants, cafes. And my favorite one just reopened like a week ago. They're just their terrace. And I ventured out on Friday, just to see, had no plans to kind of go in, but when I seen them open, I wanted to support them. But when I sat down, I don't know, just was not a comfortable experience. I think that's the expression I used earlier. Just because you still don't know, and like, what's the point in taking the risk over a 50-cent cup of coffee? I don't know. I'm still conflicted, right? I want it, I miss it, but at the same time, like, is it worth it? So that's just my own personal thing.
That's true. It's really conflicting, like going to the store or anything like that. It's really being quite. I at least had like these. I never generally get any kind of panic attacks, and it was really strange. I had these panic attacks, and just in a normal store, just
yeah.
Yeah, we have a few more questions. Just a second. I am getting them through. Marta, yes, okay. Has the COVID-19 changed the way of working at all in InVision, like compared to the previous times?
Yes and no. So the no would be that we were already distributed. So in that sense, we're totally set up for this kind of event. In that sense, nothing's really changed. But I think what has changed is the more psychological effect to people. You see people around you, for example, losing their jobs, companies cutting teams, companies shutting down. So naturally, you and the leadership team are probably thinking about those things. So, and then at the same time, like I said, some people live in New York in a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 kids. When this happens, you can't work at full capacity. You can't focus, right? So that I think has had an impact to a lot of people. For me personally, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, I like being at home. My escape or the things I enjoy is I get to travel with work, so I can't do that anymore. Last year, I probably was traveling sometimes twice, three times a month, which was too much, but once a month is nice. So I can't do that anymore. I can't leave the house, go for dinner, go for lunch, go for a coffee, go for a beer with people that I know, right, on a Friday. Can't do that anymore. And that, I feel now, what is it, like 3 months in or something, 2.5 months, is starting to weigh down on me a little bit. I've hit a wall personally and work-wise in the last few weeks, like a few times.
Wow.
So, and I'm taking some time off next week, but yet I can't go anywhere. So, and even with my manager, we talked about this earlier. I said, hey, like I want to take some time off, and he was like, sure. And he said, I'd love some time off, but my kind of release is physical location change, and I can't do that. And I was like, I'm the same. So I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I have like 5 days off next week. What am I going to do to be able to just ensure that I'm not just sitting there in the house, and then just feel more drained when I come back to work the week after. So those are the things. The first couple of months, I was like, I'm okay, but I'm feeling the effects of it. And I'm sure many others are as well.
Definitely. Just a really quick, are you allowed to go camping? Is that possible in Spain, or is that a no-no?
I don't know. That's the thing. They were very, very strict. Police were stopping you like outside the supermarket and checking your shopping bags to make sure that you bought just the essentials. So I don't know. I'm very conflicted. I'm at a point where I want to do something, but that something involves maybe putting yourself at risk or putting someone else at risk. And I'm just like, is it worth it? Can I hold out a little bit longer and just maybe figure out something else? I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to read 10 books next week and just switch my phone off, switch the like not look at anything, just have a digital free holiday at home. Right?
Oh, that sounds
I don't know.
fantastic.
So that's the plan. I've already prepared the team. I was like, I'm not coming online. So we'll see how that goes.
That actually sounds fantastic. And then you just chill. You just don't look at anything. That's it for all the questions. I think we'll wrap it up, but I wanted to say thank you so much for taking part in this. And
Sure.
it was really awesome to have you here, talk to us. And in just a second, I'm just going to take, if I don't forget about saying about anything. Oh yeah, hey, we've got something from Finland to send to you. There's a few little treats coming your way. But I'll ask for your address after this. So maybe if
Yes,
they arrive
please.
tomorrow, next week, you can enjoy them during your holiday, and so those will be coming your way.
That's
And
amazing, because I actually was in Helsinki for the first time ever, in Finland in general for the first, and I missed the place. So those goodies will be really appreciated. Thank you.
no worries. Yeah, some of them are a little surprising flavor-wise. Some of them are maybe something that you're used to, but hopefully you like those. So thank you so much. I'm going to just switch the screen again to the final. I'm just going to give the final closing words here. So again, thank you everyone for being here today. I have a little bit of a surprise for the girls too. They don't know anything about this, but they've been helping out a lot, and I couldn't have done this without them. And they've put in a lot of hours and a lot of work. And I personally like these a lot, so I thought they might like them as well. So these are pocket-sized notebooks from Victoria's journals, and they're just to help out, maybe plan the next meetup or whatever kind of design work you have and brainstorm. So these, hopefully, I'll get these to you when we actually see each other, and if we don't, then I got to ask for your addresses. But thanks for tuning in today. And the YouTube session, or this YouTube session, will be, and it has been recorded, so it will be viewable later on. We're planning on having our next meetup in August with an interior design theme, and we have the brand and managing director of Arper to give a talk that time. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Arper, they create stunning furniture with integrative and human-centered approach. So lastly, there are some other cool online meetups happening within the design community. So, just to name a few, IXDA Helsinki is starting their monthly meetups again on the 4th of June, so check their Facebook page. UX Helsinki is also going strong and frequently posts on Facebook, so check those too. And lastly, thank you, and stay safe, please, guys, and we'll see you again in August. Bye.